good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Jessica Chung. I'm an admissions officer at the Stanford Graduate School of Business MBA admissions office. I'm joined by a panel of my amazing colleagues to talk about letters of reference today. So I want to start by going over what to expect in during our time together. First, I'll have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll start with a few prepared questions just to give everybody the same base understanding of the letter of reference. What is the letter of reference? What are its purposes? What does a strong letter of reference look like? And then we want to turn it over to your questions. So that Q&A box where you've been saying hello to us, keep using that to enter your questions for us. You can also upvote other attendees' questions if you see a question that reflects something that you're curious about as well. And overall, we're going to spend about 50 minutes together. And over the course of those 50 minutes, our goals are to help you better understand how we use letters of reference and to provide recommenders, so people who are writing those letters for you, with tips and best practices on how to write a supportive letter. And this video will be shared on YouTube, so it can continue to be a resource that you share with people who are supporting you in the application process. So with that, I will turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. Will, why don't you get us started?
Hi, everyone. I'm Will, one of the admission officers here. And one of the qualities that I value is empathy as well.
I love that. Yes, I'm going to ask the rest of our panelists to also complete the sentence that we've had our attendees completing about a quality that you value. Allison, why don't you go next?
Hi, everybody. I'm Allison with the MBA admissions office. I would say, especially in the context of letters of reference, I would say I value transparency, helps me get to know you.
Awesome, thank you. And Elisa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elisa. I'm also a member of the MBA admissions team here. Excited to join you guys today. Not necessarily related to letters of reference, but I really value humor and approaching things with kind of a positivity and ability to laugh.
Awesome. Thank you all. So let's first get started with some baseline questions to get all of us on the same page. What is the letter of reference and what is its purpose in the application process? I'm going to throw it over to Allison.
Okay. The letter of reference helps us to see you through someone else's eyes. So as you know, there's different parts of the application. And so the essays let us see how you see yourself. And the letters of reference let us see how others see you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great short and pithy way to explain what the letter of reference is. As you all, our attendees, are asking people and advocates in your life to write your letters of recommendation. Will, Elisa, do you have anything that you would add to that?
I think I might add also, for those of you who may have joined us for other events, you're probably aware of the criteria we use when we're looking at an application, and whether it's intellectual vitality or demonstrated leadership, or even just getting to know you, the personal qualities and contributions, we see a lot of examples of that in the letters of reference. So when you think, what is a letter of reference, what makes a strong letter of reference, like Allison said, we learn a lot about you hearing from other people. And obviously the letter of reference, both of them that you would submit, play a pivotal role in that. And they give us some really tangible examples of things that we're looking for, especially a lot of times demonstrated leadership comes out. We're asking the people who write your letter of reference to tell us, what have you done and how have you done it? And that really helps us understand you as a person and how you approach problem solving and how you get things done.
Yeah, I really appreciate, Elisa, how you mentioned evidence and examples. I think applying to business school in particular, letters of reference take on a slightly different spirit maybe than if you were applying to For those of you who may remember applying to college, those tended to be very general. If you're applying to maybe an academic or PhD based graduate program, it's going to be much more focused on like, how does this person kind of consume and kind of produce knowledge? How do they absorb and share, right? For the business school context, that is one element that might be shared in there, but it's that evidence. How have you performed? How have you, what kind of presence have you had in, especially organizational settings? That word impact will come up a lot. Like, what's the impact you've had? What kind of footprints have you left behind? So I think over the course of today, like unpacking that will be helpful, because there is a slight different nuance to letters of rec for business school than I've seen, even having worked in other admissions offices before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your answers also give us insight into what makes a strong letter of recommendation. And I think there should be like a underline, double underline, highlight, bolded around evidence. I think throughout the application process, we're not just looking for what you've accomplished, but we're interested in how you have accomplished that. And as Allison said, hearing other voices in your application speak to not just what you've accomplished, but how can be really, really helpful. How have you demonstrated leadership? Are you able to creatively problem solve? Do you take what's given to you and see beyond what's given to you? Do you work beyond the expectations that are given to you? Do you make your workplaces more inclusive? Are you able to mobilize and influence other people to get on board with your ideas? Like, those are all things that are really, really helpful for us when we think about your leadership potential, when we think about some of your personal qualities and contributions to the organizations that you've been a part of. So thank you all for that introduction to letters of recommendation. I'm going to ask a couple more of our prepared questions and then turn it over to the Q&A box. So for our attendees, please continue submitting your amazing and thoughtful questions, and please continue upvoting questions that you're curious to learn more about. I'm also wondering if you all, our panelists, have any tips for helping set your recommenders up for success. I think obviously writing a letter of reference for someone it takes time, it takes energy. How do applicants make sure that their letter writers are set up for success and to be the best advocates possible?
I can start us off. I think the most important thing is give them plenty of warning, plenty of time. You know probably how busy your recommender is, and I would say take them out to coffee or tea or virtual coffee or tea and help them understand what the timeline is and what the questions are. You can also remind them of maybe some specific examples that they might want to include. As we said earlier, evidence is so important. So it's those specifics, anecdotes, details, examples. So you want to be sure to remind them to support whatever their assertions are with examples. You would be surprised that we don't often get like really, negative recommendations where somebody's being completely trashed. That doesn't happen very often, but more often than we would like, we get recommendations where they might say, Jessica is the best person we hired in the last 5 years, period, end of sentence, end of answer, no examples of what made Jessica such an amazing hire. So you want to make sure that they include examples.
Yeah.
And that was a great example.
Yeah, I would also say that for many, like we just talked about like how the business school letter of rec is a little bit different. So we're going to be asking all of our recommenders the same 2 questions. They're along the lines of like, how has this person performed relative to qualified peers? The other is like, tell us about a time where there was feedback. So even sharing those questions and talking through and understanding like, okay, here's a great structure and they're actually asking for what they're looking for. And then the other thing you can share with them is the evaluation criteria website. We just talked a lot about intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, but those are kind of squishy words. And they sound very high level, but on that website, it actually brings it down to tangible, bite-sized things that as they're thinking about, hey, here are the things Jessica has done. She's great. Oh, I didn't realize that falls under this bucket of what they're looking for. And so that could also help cue them into the types of examples that they could use to support their assertions.
Absolutely. And that's actually a great segue to one of the questions in the Q&A box. And Elisa, if you have more to add, I definitely want to make space for that. But Juanita in the Q&A box asked if there's a package we can share with references to give them a sense of what Stanford is looking for. I'm going to drop a link in the chat to more information on letters of reference. And if you scroll towards the bottom, you can see some of the questions, the questions that we ask, and more information for recommenders. So I will drop that in the chat. Elisa, do you have any other tips for setting up recommendation writers for success?
No, I mean, I think Will and Allison touched on the key things, and I would just echo especially what Allison said at the beginning, to give them time. One, it's just a sign of respect that you're giving them the time, you're asking for them to take that time to be thoughtful and provide specifics that will help you in your application. But also, as many of you may know about any application process to business school, but especially the Stanford application, it's an introspective process. We ask lots of questions, not only to you, but to the recommenders also. And again, just the more time someone can spend on that to provide those specific concrete examples that really help us understand who you are is a great thing. So that was already said, and I just echo that.
Jessica, if I just could add one more thing, when you're asking them to be your recommender, and again, these are probably people you have mentoring relationships anyway with, so presumably you can have an honest conversation. If you detect any reluctance, let them off the hook. I think what the reason we sometimes get those one sentence answers is somebody didn't want to turn down the request, but they honestly really don't have time and they feel rushed. And so you want to make sure that not only they know you well, but they're in a position to have the time to write a thoughtful letter and are excited to be your advocate.
I would also add, especially if there are folks who might be writing recommendations watching right now, the way we look at the recommendation, it's for those evidence pieces in context. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be versed in quote unquote business language. It also doesn't have to be the most beautiful, it doesn't have to be like artistic writing at all. Even sometimes factual, straight to the point. Here's the impact this person made. Here's the scope of it. Here's the scale of it. Here's what it looks like. Is this normal for something at this individual's level? Have they gone above and beyond? And here are the reasons why. And now here are the ripple effects of it. Sometimes getting straight to that point is where we find value, and hopefully it helps you save a little bit of time as well. I know this can also be a concern for folks whose language of writing proficiency is not English. And so again, it's not about kind of how it's written, but what's written in there and the content. So know that we are trained and we work really hard to make sure we're trying to suss that stuff out and let the evidence shine. So just wanted to also put that out there. I know there's some folks who can be a little hesitant because they're not sure what a business school recommendation looks like or how we use it.
And these letters are not long. Correct me if I'm wrong, but typically the letters are 2 to 4 pages, would you say, Elisa and Will? They're not long letters. And maybe we should address, if your recommender is not able to write in English, what you should do.
Sure. I mean, that's a good team. I mean, I think we're jumping right into some granular things, so we can definitely talk about that. If if the primary language of whoever might be writing your letter of reference is not English, they could write in the language they're most comfortable in, but then we do ask that it be translated into English upon submitting the letter of reference. And again, like what Will said, perfect grammar, syntax, and layout is not what we're looking for. We're looking for what they're going to share about you as a person, as someone who worked in their organization, as someone who had impact. You know, what did you do? How did you do it? What was the ripple effect, like Will said, of what you've done? And that can come through in a translation, again, even if the grammar is not perfect. So for those who are thinking about asking someone whose primary language is not English, please don't worry about how the translation might come across to us. That's not where it doesn't need to be perfect grammar for us to be able, like Will said, to see those examples and to understand the context of the impact that you've made. So that is something we do ask for. And I think this is leading us into, you know, just we've talked about, like Allison had great advice. If you say to someone, hey, you know, I'm applying to business school, can you write me a letter of reference? And you sense hesitation, that's a good like first hint to maybe ask someone else. But I think we should step back and talk about, like, who do we want these letters of reference to be from and why? So I think that many of you probably know if you've started an application or looked on our web pages, but we do ask for 2 letters of reference. And we ask that they be from people who have supervised your work. And we specifically ask that the first one be from someone currently supervising your work. And I do see a lot of questions out there around, I maybe had worked for someone for 4 years and I just switched jobs and I'm with someone for only 6 weeks now and things like that. So we can talk about exceptions to this, but in general, we ask that for the first one to be from someone currently supervising you. Again, back to the criteria that we're looking for. Someone who's currently supervising you is going to be able to tell us, what have you done and how have you done it? You know, what is the impact that you're making in your current role, in your current job, in your current organization? Are you taking advantage of opportunities presented to you? Are you going above and beyond? All of those things. And, you know, we'll get a great sense of that from someone who currently supervises your work. There's a lot of times, I mean, we generally give the advice around the questions, what do I do? I just started working with someone, they don't know me that well. Use your best judgment, kind of like what Allison was hinting at. If someone's hesitant when you ask them to be your recommender, same thing here in the sense that you want to make sure that when you really think about what is this person going to be able to say and do they know me well enough, that you're asking the right person, right? And so you can use your best judgment. If you have been working for someone for a short time period, or perhaps you're working for your mom or dad, it's a family business, or perhaps you're a founder of a company yourself. And so there isn't someone that supervises you in a traditional way, then use your best judgment. Who's going to be able to provide those concrete examples? It could be a member of your board. It could be someone else that you work with. It could be the person you previously worked for, since you're only working for someone for a few weeks. So again, think about what we're looking for. Ultimately, this has to sit really well inside of you. We always say the best time to apply is when you feel like your application's at its best. And we would hate for you to submit your application and then wish you had asked someone else or had a different letter of reference. So again, just use your best judgment in terms of who you ask. But there are a lot of reasons why we ask for one to be from your current supervisor. And I'm going to pause a little because I'm talking a lot. So I don't know if Will or Allison have anything else to add.
Yeah, I think, Elisa, you're right. A lot of the questions that are coming up in the Q&A box are about how to choose your recommender. And I appreciate that you went over what exactly do we ask for. So 2 letters of reference, one from a current direct supervisor or next best alternative, because we appreciate that there are, as Elisa said, many situations in which you're not able to ask your current direct supervisor for a letter of reference. And then another from somebody else who has supervised your work in some capacity. But in addition to that, do you all have any advice for how to choose a recommender? And there are several questions on this topic. I think one that has sort of risen to the top in the Q&A box is from Kanika, who I think this is coming from recognizing that our process is holistic, that the letters of recommendation are one of many pieces of your application. So Kanika asks, do you prefer a that similar characteristics about a candidate are highlighted through both recommendations, or are you looking for different characteristics highlighted from each recommender? So I think, again, kind of asking the question, like, how do you choose your recommenders, and like beyond evidence, how do you decide, how do you think about what story the recommendations should tell, and how should it contribute to the overall story of your application?
Yeah.
First of all, we have no preference, and it's really up to you how you present yourself. The questions to the recommenders are on our website, so you can see them. And I would say be asking yourself, who can best answer these questions? And if you're lucky enough to have multiple people, maybe there's two that have more robust examples, or more examples that they can include in the letter. And as far as current versus previous jobs, I think that's really how you want to present your story. I mean, if you want to show perhaps growth over time in terms of your own development, maybe you want to get a previous supervisor and then a current supervisor. If you want to really dig deep into current impact and accomplishments, maybe you want two people from your current company. And we've certainly seen excellent recommendations from both scenarios, and I'm sure there are other ways to think about it, but it's really up to you how you want to present your narrative.
Yeah, I would even make it easier than that. Sometimes trying to over strategize might have you trying to find different people to fit this perfect image of who you want to present yourself as. One way I think about it as well is sometimes the people who are providing those perspectives, as Allison and Elisa were talking about, they're your champions already. These are the folks who might be your mentors, advocates, and sponsors in different facets of your life. And you'd be surprised at how many people, even within the same organization, maybe because they're on different teams or they're at different levels, or if they worked with you on different projects, even in those instances, they might have different understandings of how you've operated and have had different experiences with you. And so it really does come back to what Allison was saying at the beginning. It's how have other people been impacted by you, and what was their experience with that? How can they communicate that to us? And everybody will do that a little bit differently. And we definitely trust you to figure out who is going to do that best for you. You may want to strategize if that becomes overwhelming, because I know sometimes it can be. This is going to sound weird because it's like the one, like, trust the unit, like, trust your instincts, trust your gut. If something says, I think this is someone who can, really advocate for me and it feels like a good choice, go with that one, regardless of their relationship to your other writer.
Absolutely. Elisa, anything you would want to add here?
I think we'll cover that really well. I don't have anything to add specifically to that.
Awesome. Looking in the Q&A box again, and there are a couple questions about timing as well. So on the letters of reference page on our website, we suggest asking somebody who has worked with you within the last 3 years. And there are a couple questions about timing, whether it's okay to ask somebody from a previous role, even going beyond 3 years ago, say 5 years ago. Do y'all have any advice on sort of figuring out the timing of your relationship with your letters of recommenders? Any advice there?
I think it was mentioned earlier, kind of what you've done in the past is a really good predictor of what you might, how you might approach problems or lead in the future. And so when we ask that one of the letters of reference be from someone who has worked with you in the past 3 years, that's because we're looking for current or more recent examples of what have you done and how have you done it? What has your impact been? That said, earlier, I also said, use your best judgment. So, for instance, if you're going to maybe choose someone who is from 4 years ago, or like I said, you're choosing someone who's not your direct supervisor for one of those reasons we cited, you do have the chance to explain to us why. And that would provide context for us if you don't. But, there's definitely a reason why we asked that it be within the last 3 years. Again, looking for that more recent examples of what you've done. And we're looking for it specifically in the job you've most recently been in. But again, you have to use your best judgment about who you are asking. I saw a question too around, for instance, maybe you have been at a company for a really long time, so you're going to choose 2 people from the same company, and that's absolutely fine. So someone's asking that, if those are the 2 people who can really provide the best examples again of what you've done and know you the best out of everyone you might be thinking about asking for a letter of reference, then again, if that feels right to you, that's absolutely fine. But like we said, you could also choose your second one to be from someone else who has supervised you in some way. It could be somewhere else you used to work. It could be that someone has supervised you in an activity outside of work in some way. So again, this is really about you thinking through, all the people you're thinking about asking and who might be able to provide those examples in the best light for you.
Those of you who are in client services businesses client might be really good choice. So doesn't have to be a current supervisor.
Yeah, I'll add one wrinkle to this. For folks who might be reapplying, you might have asked recommenders before. You might be asking the same recommenders again. Trust your instincts. We have no preference if you choose the same people, you choose different people, because maybe the relationships in your life have changed. If you are asking the same people, I definitely recommend you ask them to write the letter again from fresh eyes, even though it might be the exact same questions. Their relationship, the things they have seen you done since you last applied, might have additional information or ways that they now understand your impact in your organization or whatever setting you were in. So I think that's one thing I would definitely recommend, at least in terms of time recency. Just have them come with fresh eyes, which would, that's what we're doing. We're trying to look at who you are in the here and now.
That's great advice. Thanks. We also have a question about deferred admission. Would you all be able to speak to sort of the differences between academic letters of recommendation, professional letters of recommendation, and any tips or differences that you would want attendees to keep in mind as they sort of navigate their choices between the two?
For deferred admits, so specifically people who might be currently a full-time student who are thinking about applying to the GSB, we evaluate, each application with the same criteria that I mentioned at the beginning. So demonstrated leadership potential, intellectual vitality, personal qualities and contributions. So we suggest that you select recommenders then who in some way have supervised you, knowing that you don't have years of work experience like someone who has already graduated from undergrad and worked for a few years, but perhaps someone has supervised your extracurricular activities, or perhaps you've had a part-time internship or even a part-time job, summer internship, a job through your years at college. There's lots of things that you have probably been involved in as a full-time student that demonstrate leadership, where you've been able to have an impact. And so again, in those roles, has there been someone supervising you in some capacity? That might be a good person to think about asking for your letter of reference. This could be an academic letter of reference then in that sense. Perhaps you've been doing research for a professor and they know you very well and they're able to speak to the impact that you've had and what you've done in working with them. So that's perfectly acceptable too. But also we encourage you just to think about the extracurricular activities you may have been involved in, internships, part-time work. All of those are good places to start thinking about asking someone for a letter of reference.
I would also tie this back to Will's reminder from the beginning about business school recommendations being a little bit different. So if you do ask a professor or an academic to write a recommendation, you want to make sure they understand they're not writing a recommendation for a PhD program. This is a management program where we are looking for evidence of leadership potential. So again, often from professors, we will get a letter that says, you know, Elisa sat in the third row in the class, she got a B+ on the midterm, here's the syllabus. And that's not really helpful to us in terms of assessing your leadership potential. But if they're talking about impact you've had perhaps as a TA or in the lab, or knowledge that you created that really pushed, you know, boundaries, that's the kind of thing that can be helpful to us.
Nice job with that B+, Elisa. I heard that class was really hard.
Awesome. Thank you all. Let me see. There is another great question in here. What advice can I give my recommenders to best boost my chances of being accepted, or to best support them in writing a letter of reference? So we talked about setting up recommenders for success, but are there tips that applicants can give to their recommenders if their recommenders are feeling uncertain or are not super confident about what should go in that letter? What can they say?
Maybe 3 things. So 1, definitely share this video with them. Hopefully they'll be able to pull out some content that'll help them understand and figure out where some additional resources are. Provide them with the website, the evaluation criteria, to help them understand the things that we're looking for. And then my 3rd thing would be, if they have questions, have them contact us directly. Sometimes things might get lost in that game of telephone where they're asking you and then you're asking us. If they're able to ask us, we're able to make that connection directly. And if there's any clarification that needs to happen, there's not going to be that extra time lag in between. And hopefully that's one less thing you have to do in that realm of upward management, which again, is going to be a natural part of this. But yeah, definitely, if they have questions, have them reach out to us and we can help out.
Awesome. Allison, Elisa, anything you'd add? Tips for recommenders?
Those are great tips. I don't feel like I would add anything to tips, but in general, you know, we want them to be authentic and true to themselves. So this question is kind of stemming from a place of like, what do you think we want to hear? And hopefully we've been able to convey to you today, like that we're looking for tangible examples of your impact and specifics. Like Allison said, you know, hearing that Will is the best person I've worked with in 5 years is great. That's a really positive statement, but it isn't specific in terms of reasons why, perhaps, and in terms of kind of evidence of impact and things like that. So again, encourage them to be as specific as possible, but more so just encourage them to answer the questions, you know, honestly. We talked about things that we value at the beginning, you know, be transparent. You know, there isn't anything, there isn't a format or a statement or something that we're looking for. We're looking for those examples, and we're really hoping to try to understand who you are as a person throughout your application. And there's lots of different areas of the application where we find that, and letters of reference are definitely one of those areas.
I would just add too that I think sometimes applicants and maybe recommenders worry about, gee, I better not say that that the candidate ever struggled with anything or ever, you know, grew in their job. It's like, you know, we don't expect you to, you know, spring from the womb, you know, perfectly formed in this, superlative performer. So it can actually make a recommendation more credible if they're honest about, you know, maybe there were areas where you struggled in your job or things, you know, I mean, we all have development areas. So, you know, how you dealt with constructive criticism and things that you may have grown from.
Yeah, I think at the heart of it, it's what stood out to them about kind of their interactions with you. And that is a very open-ended statement because that's going to be different for everyone. And yes, we talk a lot about intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, but we are also not looking for any particular balance within there. And so as you're talking to the folks that you might be asking, or they're asking what are some things to think about, like just let them know that we don't have a preference for that balance. Focus on the things that were meaningful to them, that stood out to them, and they feel like should be called out in support of you. Knowing that everybody's letters are going to have a different balance of different things. No two people are going to be called the best people they worked with for the exact same reasons. Or if they are, maybe they've done it for, there's different ways that they've been able to achieve that. So again, let the recommenders speak from their perspective, kind of in their words, about the things that stood out about you, because that's going to be different for all of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And to Allison's point, one of the questions that we ask that we ask in the letters of reference is, describe the most important piece of constructive feedback you have given the applicant. Please detail the circumstances and the applicant's response. As you can tell from this panel, like all of us admissions officers, we're human. There are humans reading your letters. We have our own flaws and vulnerabilities too. And so we know what it's like to make mistakes and to grow and to get feedback. So we don't expect anybody to be perfect in this process. And one of the things we are interested in is, how do you grow? What do you do when you're given constructive feedback? So we're not expecting perfection in these letters. We're expecting to learn more about you and how you contribute to the communities and organizations you're a part of, how you grow. Those are the things that we're interested in learning about in these letters. And as you look through some of the other materials about the letters of recommendation, like you'll see exactly what questions we ask. So that's something you can do to prepare. And that's another way that you can prepare the writers of your letters of recommendation. I wanted to do maybe a lightning round of what we call tactical practical questions. And so these might be a little more fast paced, but I see that there are a lot of questions about word limits and some of the more tactical and practical aspects of writing letters of recommendation. So I wanted to do a little lightning round of that, if that's cool with our panelists. Okay, this is not something I seeded beforehand, so I just wanted to check. So Katrina has asked a question that has been upvoted. Could I ask whether the word limit for letters of recommendation is a hard limit? I understand that the limit is usually up to 500 words, but I've heard past applicants saying that the letter of rec is more flexible. Lightning response, who wants to go?
Please stay within the recommended word count. We are reading thousands of letters of recommendation. And so the more concise and specific people can be, the better it is. Sometimes the hardest thing is when you're trying to find that reference or that piece of evidence, but you're kind of flipping through a ton of pages. So again, that on the side that we're humans reading it, also be gentle on our eyes. Sometimes that size 8 font single space can be really tough to really pull out the meaty examples.
I mean, we're not sitting there counting the words. So if somebody goes over slightly, we're not going to know the difference. But, don't write us a tome. And I think some people think more is better. And that's I wouldn't follow that.
Make it easy for us.
Yeah, make it easy.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Johnny asks, one of my recommenders, and this is also an upvoted question, one of my recommenders will be leaving my company next month, so he won't have his corporate email and phone number. Should I use his personal contact instead?
I believe in that instance, you should contact us because then that way they can verify and give you the full instructions for that. Nancy in our chat box and Q&A, she is one of our experts on the process and can confirm that, but I believe that might be the way to go there.
Awesome, thank you.
We want to be able to reach your recommenders. So if their work email is going to be cut off, then I would say yes, use their personal email because we want to be able to reach them if necessary.
Awesome. Thank you all. Another upvoted question. Are the recommenders allowed some time buffer to submit their forms after the deadline for applicants has passed?
Similar to what Will said about word limit, we have a deadline for a reason. So we do appreciate if they try to. Now, obviously, especially in places where connections might be slow or things like that, if something does happen and it comes in after, reach out to our desk. But we do, one of our biggest pieces of advice at the beginning of this was to give your recommenders plenty of time. And in doing that, you're also letting them know when the deadline is and when the time of that deadline is. So hopefully they're not writing at the last minute and frantically trying to submit at that point. So our strongest piece of advice would be to try to get it in at that deadline. But we do know sometimes things can happen, like power outages, internet down, just things that we cannot foresee. In that case, like Will said, reach out to our office. But for the most part, we appreciate if they're in by the deadline.
And I would say if your recommender is having trouble, have them call or email us and at least let us know in advance that there's a problem. And we have tech support who can help them if they're struggling with the interface.
I have a tip. If you're curious about the status of where that letter is, go to my.stanford.mba. There's an application tracker so that you'll know once we receive or once you complete certain parts. And that could also help with that upward management piece.
So, one last tactical, practical question. In the how to submit section for letters of reference, we're advised to determine whether or not you will waive your right to review each recommendation. What should we consider when making this decision?
Well, the first thing to know is whether you waive your right or not has absolutely no impact on how we evaluate your recommendation. So it has nothing to do with that. It's more about your right. If you are admitted and you become a student here, if you have waived your right, that means you cannot go to your student file and say, I want to see the recommendation. If tell me if I'm saying it wrong, but if you didn't waive your right, then you could go to your student file once you're a student here and say, I'd like to see the recommendation.
I would say think about your relationship with your recommender, because sometimes if a recommender knows that, hey, you might be seeing this later on, that might skew the things that they are sharing in there. They might not be as open and candid, and they might stay a little bit more high level. So think about the relationship, and is having that freedom of knowing that this is going to be a safe conversation that they're having with us through the medium of that letter of reference, that they can be that much more open, truthful, and to Allison's point, transparent from the very beginning of the session. Let that be one of your guides as you make the decision of whether or not you're willing to waive the right to see your letter later or not.
Awesome. Thank you all. And I just want to reiterate, as I think has come up throughout this session, when in doubt, just reach out. Like, we know that this process, I know I'm a poet and I didn't even know it.
You did it again. You did it again.
We know that this process can feel so foreign to so many people, both for applicants and for recommenders. So please feel free to reach out to us. We are here to serve you ultimately. So when in doubt, just reach out. And we read all applications in context. We're not expecting this process to be one size fits all. We don't expect people's careers to be one size fits all. So be reassured that we read applications in context. And if there's anything that you feel like we should know as we're reading your application, you can certainly feel empowered to let us know that. So recordings of the session will be available on our YouTube channel afterwards. So you can revisit this conversation later. If you need to, you can direct your letters of recommendation writers to this video if you need to. We have about 5 minutes left. So in these 5 minutes, I would love to hear from our panelists any parting thoughts, or if there are any myths about letters of recommendation that they would like to myth bust right now. I would love to hear from our panelists. Final words of advice or any myth busting you would like to do.
I have one myth buster that Allison touched on, like the saying more is not better. And so that was with regards to a word limit, but also with the number of letters of reference. There are some rumors out there that it might be helpful to go above the recommended 2 letters of reference. And I just wanted to bust that myth that more is not better. So there's a reason we ask for 2, and we always appreciate when people do keep it at 2.
My advice would be, and this isn't just for the letters of reference, this is for the whole application process. Try not to worry and, especially worry over things that you have no control over. You don't have any control over who else applies. You don't have any control ultimately over what your recommender writes. So, make your best choices and then just relax and forget about it, and just don't angst over this whole process.
And then I'll do a little bit more myth busting. Word might be out there that you should have someone, from Stanford or with a big, famous name writing your letter, because that will help. Bust that myth. It's not about who's writing the letter. It doesn't matter what their relationship is to Stanford. It's what are they writing about you? It's that content, that evidence. And sometimes it's maybe that manager right above you who's going to be able to write the most compelling, thoughtful, and supportive recommendation for you. So release that notion and trust the people who have worked the closest with you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thank you to our panelists for your incredible words of advice and wisdom. Thank you to our attendees for your really, really thoughtful questions and for spending a bit of your day with us today. We're really, really grateful for it. This application process is truly a journey, and we hope that this event is just one stop along your journey. Please continue your journey at mystanford.mba. Will mentioned it as a place where you can track your application and keep track of your letters of reference, but it also will help connect you with opportunities and events to learn more, which we know is so important as you're a prospective applicant trying to figure out whether or not Stanford is the right fit for you and how to navigate this process. So please continue your journey at mystanford.mba, where you can create a personalized dashboard, track your application, browse courses and clubs, find other events, and connect with student and alumni stories. This week, we'll continue talking about the application process, and we have many amazing events. And we also have events throughout the next couple of months to connect you with students and alumni to hear about what life is like at Stanford GSB. And with that, I'll say my last thank yous. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you to my admissions colleagues who have been running the show in the background. And thank you to our attendees for spending some of your day with us. Take care.